Hey, Will.
Hey Jill, how are you?
I'm good. Excited to catch up again after our chat last week about everything that was going on in AI.
Same, same.
All right, so let's get to it. We're going to try to fly through all these topics as quickly as we can. So, one of the first things I heard about was that Apple is in talks to let Google Gemini power iPhone AI features. And basically, what that means is that Gemini would power some new features coming to the iPhone software this year, maybe not at the second. What I thought was really interesting is that Google has already paid Apple billions of dollars annually to make its search engine the default option in the Safari web browser on the iPhone and other devices. So, part of this is that I know behind the scenes, Apple is working on their own AI. I don't know how powerful it is or how effective it is. Obviously, they're feeling very trusting of Gemini, and they obviously have other options too, such as OpenAI, but they seem to feel very interested in Gemini. So, do you have any strong feelings about this?
Yeah, I feel like it's super interesting because any other previous AI that the two companies have used, like just in their phones, for example, Siri is like an Apple product and Google has they have their Google voice assistant. Same with other phones, like Microsoft had their Cortana for a while, Amazon have Alexa. And it's interesting how each of these tech giants kind of makes their own one and integrates it with their own product. But it's interesting to see that people are thinking about integrating Google's AI into their products. I think that gives Google like a massive advantage and maybe some sort of like monopoly in the AI space in terms of using it on like consumer devices like phones.
This article that we're talking about now on Bloomberg, and one thing that they said, which we discussed a bit last week about AI and innovation and the pace of it, then regulation and ethics. So, one thing that this article said was, but a partnership between the two Silicon Valley giants would likely draw the eye of regulators. Google's current deal with Apple for search is already the focus of a lawsuit by the US Department of Justice. The government has alleged that the companies have operated as a single entity to corner the search market on mobile devices. The pair has justified the arrangement by saying Apple believes Google search quality is superior to rivals and that it's easy to switch providers on the iPhone. And that I know later, in the year will be Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference. I think it's called June. So I'm guessing at that time, some more information about the AI route will be revealed at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what they talk about.
We'll have to see what happens. So I don't know if you're familiar, but NVIDIA's AI conference and expo was earlier this week, and obviously I was not there. However, I did listen to the keynote with CEO Jensen Huang, and something he mentioned was that just about every industry, not just IT, was in the audience. A lot of news outlets referenced it. He kind of said at the beginning, "We're not at a concert. We're at the AI conference at Expo." But meanwhile, there were just such a variety of people there from such a variety of industries, which I think is really cool. So then at some point on Monday, NVIDIA announced a new generation of AI chip and software for running AI models. And NVIDIA is calling it the world's most powerful chip. So, did you catch up at all on NVIDIA this week? Because it was in the news a lot. I mean, you could find an article about it pretty much anywhere.
What I just read one of the quotes about in the industry, it's not about driving down the cost of computing, but driving up the scale. I think that's what he's trying to do by bringing out a new chip that's bigger and better and has more compute power. What I find interesting is the idea that we can kind of just increase this scale and not really worry or not have too much thought about the consequences of using all that energy. The more processing power we have, the bigger the chips are, the more electricity and energy basically it requires to use those, right? And one angle is if we get to it's a slightly different direction. But if we use these chips to get to AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is as does everything just as a human would and better, then that'll be able to find ways of bringing down the cost of energy, finding new ways of doing this. So it's kind of finding the short term to, spend all this energy to get to that goal so we can reduce it. That's interesting. But I think what what I prefer is the idea of using different hardware to still create very good AI, but at a much lower energy cost.
Do you think that plays into this concept of sustainability also?
Yeah, completely. I think it's just sustainable thinking, right? It's like if we are using these massive chips that have amazing processing power, but also use energy at a rate we can't keep up with, that's not sustainable. And I think it's crucial to think in a sustainable lens.
Right. And I think in the process of building the technology, we're not always thinking of those things. Some companies certainly are, right from the get-go. I'm not going to take that away from them, but I think sometimes we realize it. I shouldn't say too late at this point, but I think it's easier when we try to think of it earlier on and be proactive instead of reactive.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And there's umpteen amount of cases, even in the last 20 years, where we've done the reactive approach. And I'm sure you can find cases where we've done the proactive approach. The thing is, the proactive approach is a lot harder because you have to actually spend time, resources, energy on looking into the future and predicting, which, yeah, if your incentive is just to grow at the fastest rate possible and innovate, which is a great thing, then sometimes that gets left behind. Yeah.
So I read an article on TechCrunch. Astera Labs IPO popped 72% on first day, showing that investor demand for tech with an AI twist is high. And what's so interesting here is that they're not an AI company, but they're significantly benefiting from the innovation and the boom of AI. It reminds me of when I recorded a podcast episode with Eugenia Jordan, who's the CMO at Tip. And she had mentioned that years ago, when refrigeration was invented, companies like Pepsi benefited most from refrigeration. So it wasn't the refrigeration companies that benefited the most, it was other companies. So I kind of thought in that same mind frame. I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about Astera, but I started to read a little bit about it. So a quote in the article which helps us better understand: Astera Labs makes connectivity hardware for cloud computing data centers. Because AI requires massive amounts of data moving into and out of and around data centers, Astera has seen recent revenues bloom. So that's kind of why I think it's similar to this whole concept of refrigeration. Pepsi needed their products to be refrigerated, just like you know, AI requires a lot of data to be moved around. So Vestera Labs is making the hardware for cloud computing data centers. I could see why Astera would profit from AI, even though they're not an AI company.
Yeah. 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 Makes complete sense. It's like which companies are needed to facilitate AI and its applications. And I guess Astera is one of them. Yeah. Really interesting. And I think Astera maybe couldn't have predicted. I'm not sure, but it might have been hard for them to predict this is the avenue that they're going to go down until AI came around. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's this need in the market and we can fill it. And that's, yeah, kind of how they've taken off.
The article that I read, which again was on TechCrunch,
Mhm.
mentioned that after generating almost $80 million in 2022, their revenue went to $115.8 million in 23, which obviously was due to AI. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
huge.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It's about 45%, I think. I can't do the
Wow.
math in my head, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. So
pretty
it's
significant.
a massive uptake. Yeah.
I know that you talked a little bit this week about Hugging Face, which is going to be launching an open robotics project. Not all that familiar. Do you think you can give us a little background on it?
I found that interesting because firstly, OpenAI released a video of their kind of robot. I forget the name, but they released a video of a robot giving a human an apple. It would say, "Oh, go do the dishes," and it would put dishes in like a dishwashing container. That's like the next step of like of AI taking a human form, is literally being able to do stuff in the physical world. But then I saw that Hugging Face are launching an open robotics project that's open source. So like basically anyone can access the code behind it, which is like it is super cool, but also it's like, oh wow, now people have the code to be able to like program a robot to basically have its own mind. Well, maybe not have its
Right,
own
because
mind.
they could modify it or, copy it or revise it or whatever they wanna do with it.
It's like a big step forward.
Okay, William, the last article I wanna chat about today was a piece that I read in the New York Times. Microsoft hires DeepMind co-founder to run consumer AI. A little background here. Mustafa Suleyman had co-founded DeepMind back in 2010, which was an AI lab in London. It was acquired by Google like 4 years later, and then he left Google in 2022 and co-founded Inflection AI, a startup looking to build a personal AI assistant. And then this past May, it introduced its consumer assistant, Pi, hope I pronounced that correctly, which didn't get as nearly as many users as ChatGPT, but I'm not super familiar with Pi, so I can't really speak on that. But Mr. Schliemann is going to basically be responsible for expanding a consumer AI business, including Microsoft's Copilot chatbot Bing, which we're all familiar with, and Edge internet browser. So, did you read anything about that? Do you know anything about it? Did you hear about it?
Yeah, someone at the house was talking about how he moved, like he basically is now CEO of AI at Microsoft, which is a big move. And yeah, so I actually talked to my mom about Mustafa Suleyman this week. She read his book about it's called The Coming Wave. I actually haven't read it, but what I gather from it is it's explaining like the direction AI can go and what we need to do to kind of stop it and prevent it. And I think that links to kind of the mission of Inflection AI, his previous company, because they were building, as you said, Pi, which is it's like one liner is the first emotionally intelligent AI. So when I think emotional intelligence, I think like empathy and those things, which I find it super cool that he's prioritized that as the main selling point of his AI rather than, accuracy or speed or anything else. Like the selling point is the emotional intelligence. So I think that's really cool he did that. And then yeah, moving to Microsoft is a big move. I saw it on X or Twitter. I saw that he made the move. It shocked me.